The storm outside roared like a warning, the kind of night when even the strongest walls felt fragile. Inside the sprawling mansion of Adrian Cross, a man whose wealth commanded both envy and awe, silence reigned. But in one of the many guest rooms sat a girl who had known nothing of wealth or grandeur. Her name was Alina, and she trembled not from the cold, but from the weight of her choice. She had been offered comfort, gold, and luxury beyond imagination, but she did not want any of it. Instead, she whispered a request that left even the staff speechless. She wanted to stay with the servants, not in the golden guest suites reserved for Adrian's special visitors. Her words carried no arrogance, no hidden motive. They were raw, innocent, and sincere. For a girl who had only known the value of hard work, who had lived with hunger more often than she had eaten her fill, luxury felt like chains. She feared losing herself in it, feared forgetting who she was. And when the billionaire himself heard her words, his reply stunned everyone present. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humility, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Stories like this remind us that humanity still shines in the most unexpected places. Alina's story began long before she stepped into Adrian Cross's world. Born in a small town to parents who worked themselves to exhaustion in factories, her childhood was never painted in bright colors. It was a canvas of gray, patched with nights when there was no dinner and mornings when her clothes carried the sour smell of poverty. Yet, within her burned a light her parents had nurtured, the belief that dignity was not tied to money, but to the way a person treated others. When her parents passed away within months of each other, her father from an accident at work and her mother from illness worsened by grief, Alina's fragile world collapsed. Alone, she left school and worked tirelessly as a housemaid in a city where no one knew her name. She scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and cleaned windows, earning just enough to keep herself alive. But even in those days, when loneliness and fatigue clawed at her, she never let bitterness take root. She smiled at children in the streets, shared scraps of food with stray dogs, and bowed respectfully to every person who showed her even a shred of kindness. One evening, fate twisted her path. She was cleaning at a modest restaurant when a group of wealthy men entered, laughing, throwing around money like confetti. Their leader was Adrian Cross, the billionaire whose face often appeared on magazine covers. But unlike his companions, his eyes seemed hollow, like wealth had carved emptiness instead of joy. When his friends teased Alina, mocking her worn clothes and calloused hands, she did not fight back. She simply smiled politely and continued sweeping, her dignity unshaken. It was that moment, her refusal to let shame dim her spirit, that caught Adrian's attention. In the days that followed, Adrian arranged to have her hired temporarily at his estate. Many believed it was pity, others whispered it was curiosity, but none could guess the truth. Adrian was searching for something money had never bought him. He had grown surrounded by glittering lies, false friendships, and hollow admiration. People bowed to his bank account, not to him. Yet here was a girl who had nothing, yet carried herself as though she owned the sky. When Alina entered the mansion, she was overwhelmed. Chandeliers glowed like suns, floors shone like mirrors, and tables overflowed with food she had only seen in magazines. But instead of excitement, she felt small. She gravitated toward the servants' quarters, drawn by the simple laughter of the kitchen staff, the smell of fresh bread, and the sound of footsteps that worked, not wandered. When Adrian's personal assistant offered her a luxurious suite, Alina hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "I cannot stay there," she said softly. "Please, let me stay where the workers stay. That is where I belong." The room fell into silence. Servants glanced at each other nervously, unsure if she had just insulted the billionaire's hospitality. But Adrian, who had overheard her words, stepped forward. His face was unreadable, his usual coldness sharpened by curiosity. Everyone expected him to be offended, to laugh at her humility, to remind her of her place. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "If that is where your heart feels at peace, then that is where you shall stay." The servants were stunned. Billionaires were not known for kindness, much less for bending to the requests of a poor housemaid. But Adrian's reply was not for them. It was for himself. For the first time in years, he saw honesty unshaken by fear or greed. In the days that followed, Adrian watched Alina quietly. She worked harder than anyone else, never once treating her position as beneath her. When a servant spilled soup, she was the first to kneel and clean. When a gardener cut his hand, she rushed with cloth to stop the bleeding. At night, while others rested, she stayed behind to polish silverware until it gleamed. But what struck Adrian most was not her labor. It was the way she treated every servant as family. She laughed with them, listened to their worries, and shared her own bread when meals fell short. Adrian began to join them, at first standing at a distance, then slowly sitting at the kitchen table, sharing the food meant for the workers. The mansion buzzed with gossip. The billionaire who never smiled now lingered among his staff, softened by the presence of a girl who owned nothing but her heart. But not everyone was pleased. Adrian's business partners saw Alina as a threat. They whispered that she was a manipulator, a girl pretending to be humble to climb into his trust. Even some of the servants, poisoned by suspicion, doubted her. The pressure built, and one evening, Adrian confronted her gently. "Why?" he asked. "Do you refuse the life I can give you? Why do you stay among those who serve when you could be the one served?" Tears welled in Alina's eyes. She lowered her head and whispered, "Because I have seen how easy it is to lose yourself when you forget where you came from. If I sleep in golden sheets, I will wake up thinking I deserve them. And I don't want to forget the hands that carried me when I was too weak to stand. To me, your servants are not servants, they are people. My people. If I must belong anywhere, it is with them." Her words broke something inside him. For years, Adrian had been surrounded by voices telling him what he deserved, what he owned, what he was entitled to. But here was a girl who measured life not by riches but by love, humility, and belonging. He realized then that the wealth he clung to had built a fortress around his heart, but Alina's truth had opened a door he didn't know he needed. From that night, Adrian changed. He spent less time in hollow boardrooms and more time in the gardens of his estate, talking with workers, laughing with cooks, learning the names of those who had been invisible for too long. He began using his wealth to improve their lives, building schools for their children, providing health care for their families, raising wages where others would have cut costs. And always, Alina stood beside him, not as his possession, not as a woman chasing fortune, but as the voice that reminded him of humanity. Years later, when people asked Adrian what had caused the transformation, he would only smile and say, "A girl once chose my servants over my gold. And it taught me that true riches are not counted in what we own, but in how we love." Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps spread more stories that remind the world of compassion, humility, and second chances. Sparkle's special request. Comment below with one word that describes what you felt during this story. Your words matter more than you know. And so, Alina's choice, simple yet profound, became a lesson not just for Adrian, but for everyone who heard it. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in rising above others, but in standing beside them.